we have learned that CBP has dynamic relationship. I mean the cost, volume, profit in broader sense, but we have seen that there are 5 components and they have a dynamic relationship. And if we change one variable out of these 5 variables, we will see that other things are getting changed. And what can we do? We can think of that what should be the starting point, or in which point I should hit or I should think of to get an expected outcome. Say if we have expected outcome that I should have higher net operating profit margin. So I have some constant, say my fixed cost is constant and my variable cost per unit is constant. So I have some flexibilities in terms of sales unit. So by changing the sales unit, how much net operating profit margin I can generate. So the relationship helps us that which variable I should work on to get the expected outcome. It can be in terms of profit, it can be break-even point, it can be like anything if we have the changes in fixed cost, or if we have anything like changes in the variable cost per unit, or if we have anything like the increase in sales unit. Okay. So in the learning objective 3, today we like to see that how contribution margin ratio can be helpful to compute the changes in contribution margin and the changes in net operating income. If we think of that there has been a changes in sales volume, or we are expecting to change our sales volume. So how can contribution margin ratio can be helpful? This is a new concept, contribution margin ratio. In terms of the term we have coined today, but things are related what we discussed earlier. So as long as you are familiar with the contribution margin ratio must be so familiar to you. So we have come to learn that contribution margin is the amount remaining after covering the variable expenses, and this amount is remaining to make up the fixed cost. Okay. So what can we do if we divide the contribution margin either in total or per unit by the sales value, or by the sales or the price per unit, we get a concept, or we get an idea of the contribution margin. But you see that we are not saying contribution margin, we are saying this as a contribution margin ratio. So you probably can recall that in our current case, we have the contribution margin of 200. If I try to remind you that our per unit sales price is 500 taka, $500, and sales unit is 500. No, sales unit was 400. Then variable cost per unit is $300 per unit, and fixed cost was about 80,000. Fixed cost was about 80,000. I would recheck if there is any wrong, or you can help me. Okay, so we see that our contribution margin is the difference between the sales price and the variable cost. So we see that in terms of total, our contribution margin is this amount, our sales unit multiplied by price 500 minus variable cost. This is the contribution margin per unit. So from this we get how much? 80,000. So this is our total contribution margin. So if we, what we are saying that if we divide the contribution margin dollar volume by the sales, or we express the contribution margin in terms of relative to sales, which is 200,000, 500 per unit selling price multiplied by 400 quantity. In that case, we are mentioning that this is the contribution margin ratio. Remember, this is not contribution margin. Contribution margin is this amount, the numerator amount. But when we are saying contribution margin ratio, the amount is this one. It is in terms of total, but in terms of, I mean, the per unit basis, we have per unit selling price is 500. And if we express the per unit contribution margin 200 relative to the selling price per unit, we see that it is the same amount. I mean the 40%. You will see that it is 40%. And it is also 40%. Okay. So what we have done, we have learned that how contribution margin ratio can be calculated. Okay. Now the task is, what do we mean by the contribution margin ratio? From here, you can understand it. Let me change my pen color. You see on this part, for $1 of sales, I'm getting 40 cents of contribution margin. Or for 1 taka of sales, I'm getting 0.4 taka or 40 paisa as contribution margin. Okay. If we want to express this number in terms of the incremental, I think is same. For 1 unit increase in sales, I will have 0.4 taka increase in contribution margin. Okay. So let's try to get the opposite side of the contribution margin. This is the calculation what we have done in terms of per unit. Here we have shown this to you in previous slide that this should be 40%. Okay. Now what I like to highlight, the other side of the contribution margin, or what is the flip side of the contribution margin. So we are getting the contribution margin by subtracting variable cost. Okay. And divide this number by sales, we get the contribution margin ratio. And we know that this difference is contribution margin. So actually what we are doing this thing. But alternatively, if we do this thing, sales minus contribution margin over sales, what we are doing here, we are expressing variable cost relative to sales. Now, if the previous one or the flip side of the flip side, what we discussed is contribution margin ratio. I mean this one, if it is contribution margin ratio, what we would say about this? It should be variable expense ratio. It should be variable expense ratio. So we had $300 per unit variable cost, and we had 400 unit selling price. So we had 120,000 total variable cost. If we express this number in terms of the sales of $200,000, we see that we have variable expense ratio of 60%. So you see, as I have mentioned, that these are flip side of each other. So if you have the contribution margin, say 40%, is it possible to get the variable expense ratio? If we have the contribution margin of 40%, it is possible to get the variable expense ratio in this way. Okay, so this is the sales, this one is the contribution margin ratio. Okay, now if we do just the opposite, we subtract the sales of $1 and we subtract the 0.6 variable expense ratio. Variable expense ratio, what we will get? We get the contribution margin ratio. So this is the simple thing what we have learned conceptually, but here we are just expressing the number in terms of some very plain equation, nothing difficult or nothing sophisticated here. Okay, so in this way, what we see that contribution margin ratio and variable expense ratio are interrelated. So I believe that nothing is too advanced here. It's just kind of expressing the same thing what we learned conceptually. Okay, now what we like to do, we like to apply the contribution margin ratio. That what is the use of contribution margin ratio? Does it serve any purpose, or does it help our time? Does it help to reduce our time consumption for getting our expected result or for looking at what is happening? So yes, it has some purposes. We like to see that for what purposes contribution margin ratio can be helpful. Okay, so before looking at the way that how it can be helpful, let's assume a case or assume some changes in from our base case. That in our base case we have 400 units of sales. Now in our new case we see that our sales has increased from 400 units of bikes to 500 units of bikes. So what will be the response of contribution margin for the changes of sales unit from 400 to 500 units? So this is our new case, that what will happen if our sales unit increases by 500 units from the 400 units. Okay, now you see that what will be our increase of sales volume or increase of our sales for the changes in sales unit. Note that we have not changed our sales price. And also remember, this is a number one assumption of CVP analysis, that sales price will remain constant. Okay, so you see that what will be the changes of sales for the changes in the sales unit? We see that 100 units of bikes is expected to increase in the sales unit. So for 100 units of new sales and at $500 per bike price, we get how much new sales? It should be $50,000. Now, it is our sales value. Okay. Now we have the contribution margin ratio of 40%. From where we are getting the contribution margin ratio? From the previous calculation, we have learned that our contribution margin ratio is 40%. As long as our fixed our sales price and our variable cost per unit remain constant. Okay, so if we multiply our incremental sales 50,000 by the contribution margin, my pen is disturbing. Yeah, we are here. Okay, let me write here 50,000 is our incremental sales. If we multiply this by our our contribution margin ratio, not contribution margin, 40%. In that case, how much will be the changes in net operating income? We will be able to get this number by doing this calculation. We see that our net operating profit margin and net operating income will go up by 20,000 as it is plus. You see that we have not talked about anything about the fixed expenses because it is constant, or it has not changed from the changed case. So that is the reason that we are getting that how much net operating of profit will go up or go down for the changes in the sales unit. Okay, so you see, instead of doing the contribution margin format income statement, we can simply do this shortcut calculation to get the response of net operating income for the changes in the sales value, or for the changes in sales unit. Okay, so this is the way how it is useful. Now, if we do the contribution margin format income statement traditionally, we can verify that we are doing the right thing. Okay, so how this is the base case, don't forget this. And what is happening here, our sales unit has increased from 400 to 500 units. We see that for this one, we have this sales value 500 multiplied by 500. Then we are subtracting variable expenses, which is 500 multiplied by 300 per unit. And we get this contribution margin 100,000. And we see that our fixed expenses 80,000 as before, and we get this 20,000 net operating income. And we see it was our break-even point. From this base case, we see that our net operating income has increased from nothing to 20,000. So this is the same thing what we have seen here. Now, the question to you, between this case, the base case of 400 units and the new case of 500 units, has there been any changes in the contribution margin ratio? Yes or no? I see responses are coming. What about other responses? No, again. Okay, so I see that you are responding it rightly. Yeah, you are responding it rightly, and Famit has expressed it clearly that as long as there has been no changes in the sales price per unit and the variable expenses per unit, there should not be any change in the contribution margin ratio. But you see, if you look at the contribution margin is changing. but the contribution margin here in this case is 40%, and in this case it is also 40%. Okay. Again, what we are seeing that a 50,000 increase in sales revenue is causing the increase of net operating income by 20,000. So we have learned that how the contribution margin ratio calculation can be helpful for, or can be useful for us. Okay. Yeah. Next, we like to check your understanding by making a quiz. Coffee Clutch is an espresso stand in a downtown office building. The average selling price of a cup of coffee is $1.49, and the average variable expense per cup is 0.36. The average fixed expense per month is $1,300, and average of 2,100 cups are sold each month. What is the contribution margin ratio for the Coffee Clutch? Contribution margin ratio. Do not take your calculator. Let me help you. How can you approximate? So we need either the per unit selling price and per unit variable expense, or we need the total sales and total variable expenses. So as long as per unit selling price and variable expenses are given, we do not need to go for taking the total sales or total variable expense. Okay, we see that price per unit is 1.49, and our variable expense is $0.36. We need to get this calculation. Do not use your calculator. You see that it is approximate of 1.5. Okay. Now you see that approximately, if we think of that 1.5, for 1.5, we have a 50% is 0.75, 25% is 0.375. 50% of 1.5 is 0.75. 25% of 1.5 should be 0.375, as it is 50% of 0.75. Okay, so we have learned that 0.375 is 25% of 1.5. We see this number are very closer. So we know that this number is 0.25 or 25%. So contribution margin. Okay, what we have done here, we have expressed the variable expense here. So if we get a ratio here, that should be the variable expense ratio. We can do the alternative thing by subtracting this 0.36 from the selling price of 1.5 or 1.49. But you see from here, you see that variable expense ratio is 0.25. So the contribution margin ratio should be somewhat the 0.75 plus or 0.75. Okay. You see why it should be greater than 0.75, because you see the numerator is a little bit lower, and we see that denominator is little bit lower from this 1.5, and the denominator is little bit lower from this. Okay. So you will see that it should be somewhat lower from 0.25, and alternatively, the contribution margin should be somewhat 1 minus the variable expense ratio, which is closer to 0.75. You see that this number is 0.758. So this should be your answer. If you do the calculation without taking help from your calculator. Okay. So sometimes these calculations are useful, and will also help you to increase your mental ability. Okay. So is it 0.758 from your calculation? I mean the contribution margin ratio. Is it 0.758 from your calculation? Yes, no, yes. Okay, so you have got it that how can we get the contribution margin ratio? Remember this one we have done for simplifying or for mental calculation, and this one is the variable expense ratio, which is the flip side of the contribution margin ratio. Okay. If you have to express the number on your script by doing some calculation, you need to express the number in this way. We know that how can we get the unit contribution margin. Okay. Now, what we like to see that we like to see more applications of contribution ratio by taking another case that if there has been increase in sales volume, we see that as long as fixed expenses remain constant, there should be no role of fixed expenses if we want to see what will be the incremental profit for the incremental sales. But sometimes you will see that fixed expenses will go up or go down for changes of sales unit from the reference range. So we need to know what is the total perspective of the profit considering the fixed expense variable in the scenario. Okay. So this is the total scenario that how can we get the profit using the contribution margin ratio. Okay. So what we need to do, it is the same thing what we learned before, but we are expressing in a more formal way. We need to multiply the sales by the contribution margin, and we need to subtract the fixed expenses. So this is the way that how equation can be helpful. And this is one way of formalizing what we have learned. Okay. So if RBC, the cycle company, increased its sales volume to 500 bikes, what would be the management expectation for profit or net operating income to be? So you see that for the increasing sales volume from 400 to 500 bikes, we know that our sales will be equal to 500 unit multiplied by $500 per unit. So this should be our sales volume. And we know that our contribution margin ratio is 40%. So from here, we get the contribution margin. And if we subtract the fixed expenses, we get the total profit in this scenario. Total profit in this scenario. So if you do this calculation, you will see that the profit will go up. Profit in total is 20,000. Profit in total is 20,000. So in this way, what can you do? You can also calculate the total profit. In previous case, we have seen that it is possible to calculate the incremental profit. So we see the total profit in the 500 bike sales case, we will see the 20,000 total profit. I mean, the total profit here means the net operating profit. Okay, so this is the way that how contribution margin ratio can be helpful or can be useful. Now, we'll see several cases by changing the variables. It is a kind of sensitivity analysis. I do not know, have you heard about the term earlier that you want to look at the sensitivity of one variable. Here, our one variable is net operating income. By changing the value of one particular variable in your calculation, say, if we change only variable cost per unit, our fixed cost remain constant, selling price remain constant, sales volume remain constant. It's a kind of sensitivity analysis. Again, if you keep the variable cost constant, there has been no changes, only you change the fixed cost and other things same, and you want to see that what will be the response of net operating income for the changes in fixed cost. This kind of analysis is a kind of sensitivity analysis. Okay. Now, if you consider the changes in total scenario, say you want to see that what will be the changes in net operating income for changes in variable cost, changes in fixed cost, changes in selling price, and there has been no change in sales volume. In that case, you see that you are changing one variable or you are changing a multiple variable to see the response of the net operating income. The latter case, what I just have mentioned. Multiple variables I have mentioned. So in that case, that will be known as scenario analysis. That will be known as scenario analysis. You have come to learn about the sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis, the simulation analysis more in your capital investment decision course, where it is much useful. But here we are also applying the same thing, but here our focus is from the managerial accounting perspective. But the idea is similar, that what we are doing here first, what we will do first, the sensitivity analysis, then we will do some scenario analysis. Okay. First of all, if there has been changes in fixed cost and there has been changes in sales volume, how many variables we are changing in our calculation? I see responses, multiple, 2. So it should be a scenario analysis. It should not be a sensitivity analysis. Okay, it should be a scenario analysis because you are changing more than one variable. Okay. Can you recall that what we have mentioned in the slide before the previous slide to get the calculation or to get the usefulness of the contribution margin ratio? From this information, and I believe you have learned what is the base information, should there be any changes in the contribution margin ratio for these changes? Should there be any changes in the contribution margin ratio for the changes of sales unit and for the changes of fixed cost? No. Okay, in that case, our contribution margin ratio equation can be helpful for us. Okay, let's try to use this. Okay, profit is equal to contribution margin ratio multiplied by sales. And then I do not know why it is happening. It didn't happen earlier. Okay, so contribution margin is 0.4 or 40%. Multiplied by our total sales should be 540. And it should be multiplied by selling price. What is our selling price? 500. Now, can you please mention what should be the value if we multiply 540 units by 500 selling price per unit? $270,000. Yeah. Now, what is our fixed expense? I mean, in a previous case, 80,000. And now if the fixed expense go up by 10,000, what will be the new fixed expense or new total fixed expense? 90,000, because the advertising expense is fixed expense. And what should be our profit in this case? I see responses are coming, but what about the responses from other people? Other people, 18,000, okay. Okay. Good responses are coming, 18,000. There has been no differences in their answer. So I should write here 18,000. Can you recall that what was our profit in case of 500 units? Yeah, 20,000. In earlier case, it was 20,000. So you see that for these changes, you see this is a good thing. I mean, increase of unit sales from 500 to 540. This is a good thing, right? This one, for the increase of sales unit from 500 to 540, this is a good thing. But you see, our monthly advertising budget is going up by 10,000. We cannot see is it a good thing or a bad thing unless we see what will be the responses of profit in response to changes in the increase of monthly advertising budget. So you see the previous case, our profit was 20,000, but in this new case, new scenario, we see that our profit has gone down by 2,000 to 18,000 from 20,000. So you see that how the contribution margin ratio analysis is helpful, that it is helping us that what will be the changes in profit, or what will be the profit if we change the scenario of the sales unit by changing our sales unit or by increasing our fixed expenses in terms of monthly advertising budget. Okay, let's see whether we have done the right thing by looking at the calculation from the conventional contribution format income statement. We see that we have done the right thing. Our profit should be 18,000. And this one is 2,000 lower from the previous 20,000 profit in case of 500 unit sales. We see that our profit is to be decreased by 2,000 for the increase in sales unit, and simultaneously increasing of advertising expenses of 10,000. You see why this 10,000 advertising expenses is incurred. Why it is necessary? We already have some advertising expenses, but why we are thinking of increasing our advertising expenses? What is our motivation? I'm not giving any additional information. I'm just to get additional sales of how many units? To get increase of sales. Yeah, that is good that you have you are with me and you are thinking of the total picture, not at only looking at the numbers. Okay, now we are thinking of another case. I mean, if we look at the incremental part, which we would say a shortcut solution. So we know that contribution margin remain constant of $200 per unit. Okay. We just have changed our sales unit from 500 to 540. So this one should be the changes or increase of contribution margin, as it is a positive number. If it were a decrease in sales, in that case, it would be decrease in contribution margin. So we see that our contribution margin is going up by 8,000 for the increase of sales from 500 to 540. At the same time, our fixed expense incremental part is 10,000, which is 10,000 positive. And if we see our changes in profit by subtracting the increase of advertising expenses from the contribution margin, we see that it is to be 2,000. So here you see that the same thing what we solved in previous slides. And this is a way that how can we make a incremental analysis. Now, the second scenario, what we are trying to do here, what is the profit impact if RBC can use higher quality raw materials, thus increasing variable cost per unit by $10 to generate an increase in unit sales from 500 to 580. Okay. Higher quality raw materials. If it is a purpose, when you are thinking of higher quality of raw material, you should be prepared to incur more cost or incur less cost. Variable cost. If you think of higher quality material, more cost, and it should be kind of variable cost because the raw materials can be directly attributed, the cost of raw materials can be directly attributed to the product we are thinking of. Okay. So what is our purpose for increasing the higher quality raw materials? It is not our purpose to get the increasing variable cost or increased variable cost. Our holistic purpose is that we have realized that if we do this, our sales will go up from 500 to 580 units. This is our holistic purpose. Now, how many variables are changing in this scenario? One is variable cost per unit, and another one is sales unit is going up, right? So it's another sensitivity analysis or scenario analysis. Yeah, good. Scenario analysis. So what can we do? We can use our learning in this way. Profit. We like to see the impact on profit. We know the contribution margin ratio is now 40%, or it has changed. What is our contribution margin now? 500 per unit price minus 310 variable expense. This is our contribution margin per unit. And if we divide this by per unit selling price 500, we see that it should be, yeah, it has changed, but how much it is? The new contribution margin, 30. 8. Yeah, good. It was initially a 40%. Now you see the contribution margin has changed. It should be 0.38. Now, if we multiply this by the total sales value, which is the 580 into 500. In that case, it should be 290,000. Yeah, 290,000. Okay. So we are getting the contribution margin amount from here. And we should subtract the fixed expense, right? Has there been any changes in fixed expense? There has been no changes in fixed expense. And note that what we are doing here, we are doing the total analysis, not the incremental analysis, okay? So in that case, you need to write the fixed expenses in total, okay? So what should be the amount here, the profit? In comparison to 500 units, I mean, okay, 30,200, yeah, 30,200. Can you recall that what was our profit in case of 500 units having the contribution margin of 40%? Okay, we see that in our new case, our net operating profit is 30,200. And if we consider our base case, and now 500 units, not the 400 units, we would see that it was 20,000. So for the increase of sales by 40,000, how 40,000 increase in sales? You see our new sales is 290,000. Our previous sales was 250,000. So there has been increase of $40,000 sales volume, sales. Okay. So what is our contribution? Our contribution is 40,000. I mean, in terms of net operating income, we are not getting the same amount of increase of 40,000. We have seen that 40,000 increased in the sales value from 250,000 to 290,000. But we are not seeing that net operating profit is going up to 60,000 by 40, change of 40,000. We see only half of it, 30,200. We see there has been no changes in fixed expense. Okay. But what is happening? Which is eating up our profit? Which amount is eating up our profit? There has been no changes in fixed expense. You see there has been changes in variable expense. There has been changes in variable expense. So the variable expense is increased variable expense is eating up our cost. And we have remaining 30,200 as profit as we have calculated in previous one. Yeah, this one. 30,200. Okay. So you see from the previous case of 500 units, we see that there has been changes in positive changes in net profit of 10,200 for the increase of sales by 40,000 units. Now, is it good to use the high quality raw materials from this analysis in terms of profit? Is it a good idea compared to the previous case, previous scenario? So in this case, you can do this, okay? So you know that high quality raw materials incur high cost, high variable cost. And high quality raw materials also gives the seller the bargain to increase the price. Okay. Now we are looking at the new scenario by changing 3 variables at a time. Okay. You know that how many types of vegetable oils are available in our country? How many types of vegetable oils are available in our country? Or would you please write the name you know? Types of vegetable oils you use for regular cooking oil. Write the one which you know. Nowadays, there are several vegetable oils available. We have got the answer soybean. What about any other option we have for vegetable oil? Olive oil, sunflower, then, yeah, mustard oil. Yeah. Then any other? Any innovative item? You have idea? I just want to see that, yeah, rice bran oil. I'm looking for this answer. You are aware of what is happening in our, okay. Olive oil, palm oil, soybean oil, canola oil, corn oil, peanut oil. Okay, so I have got so many responses. This is good. And you know that all our oils all serve the purposes of cooking, but you see that they are priced differently because their variable costs are different. Their variable cost per unit, I mean the per liter is different because of the quality of the raw material. Okay, so it is a classic example that for increase in the quality of the raw materials, you have to increase the variable cost per unit. And if you do not have the option to increase the price per unit, in that case, you need to see that for changes in quality, from lower quality to higher quality, is it possible that you will have higher profit because you will be able to serve more sales by increasing your quality? Okay, you see people are now becoming more health conscious and they are reducing their consumption of conventional soybean oil, and they are trying to switch their choice from the soybean oil to other sunflower oil or rice bran oil or peanut oil or the mustard oil. These things and these new forms are coming in the market, and the existing companies which are producing the soybean oil, they are now packaging new products by selling soybean oil, by selling the sunflower or by selling the rice bran. Okay, so this is the way that how the contribution margin ratio will help us to determine whether we will launch a product. If we see that launching this product will be contributing factor to increase our net operating profit, in that case, we will decide to float the new product, otherwise not. Okay, so you need to think of the demand, whether the demand is rising for the high quality material. In that case, it is a good option that switch to new higher quality. Okay, so that is happening, but these oils which you have mentioned are not so available 10 years ago. Okay, and the conventional soybean oil is not available in developed countries. Okay, you need to find out it from elsewhere because their shops do not sell the conventional soybean oil. They sell only sunflower, or they sell only kind of mustard oil, or they sell only olive oil, these things. Okay. Okay, let's think of the new case. What is the profit impact if the RBC cuts its selling price $20 per unit, increases its advertising budget by 15,000 per month, and increases sales from 500 to 650 units per month? We see that so many things have been happening here. So many things have been changing here, and we need to think of this together. Okay, first of all, what can we do? We can look at the total scenario by preparing a plain income statement, I mean contribution format income statement, because we see that our sales volume has changed from 500 to 650. So for 650, have we seen any changes in selling price? Yeah, we have seen in the changes in selling price, because the selling price has decreased by 20. So our existing selling price is 500, so it is now 20 less, I mean the 480. So it should be 650 multiplied by 480. And there has been no changes in variable expense, so it is same as same, 195,000. And but we would see that there has been changes in contribution margin because there has been changes in selling price. And we have seen that our fixed expense is expected to go up by 15,000 because we are increasing our advertising budget by 15,000. Our previous advertising expense, our previous fixed expense was 80,000, so it should be now 95,000. So we would see that the new profit will be 22,000. So alternatively, what could we do? We could use the equation what we shown in the previous slide to get the 22,000 profit. And we see that for changes of these three variables, some changes might be positive, some changes might be negative. There is no clear answer that it is a positive thing or it is a negative thing. But we need to think of the scenario that what is happening and is it in an expected direction. We see from our base case of 500 units, our profit is expected to go up by 2,000. So in that case, it is justifiable that if we allow the sales price go down by 20 per unit, it is a good thing. And if we increase the advertising budget by 15,000 for generating 150 units of more sales, okay? So we see by balancing the good thing and by balance with the bad thing, I mean the increasing of cost, we see that is still our net value is positive because our net operating income has gone up by 2,000. Okay. Okay. Now we like to see that what is the profit impact if the RBC pays a 15 sales commission per bike sold instead of paying salesperson flat salaries that currently total 6,000 per month. You see that what is happening. Our salesperson's sales commission was flat, part of flat salary. That regardless of the number of bikes sold by the salesperson, we would pay 6,000 commission per month. But now we have changed our policy. We are paying $15 per bike as a sales commission to the salesperson. What is happening here? In terms of the cost behavior, we are changing the cost classification. The sales commission, which was fixed cost to us, are we changing it to any other cost in terms of cost behavior? Are we changing it to fixed cost convert to variable cost? Yeah, precisely this is happening here. Fixed cost is changing to variable cost. In that case, will there be any changes in the contribution margin? Yes, there will be changes in contribution margin. And fixed cost is expected to go down by 6,000. Okay, but you see that for in the same case, we are expecting that this will encourage the salesperson to increase more sales or to be satisfied with the same unit of sales? But what is our purpose for converting a fixed cost to variable cost? What is our motivation? What we are trying to do? More sales. Yeah. So they will be inclined to generate more sales because now their sales commission has become variable. It is no longer fixed. So as a salesperson, you do not like the variable sales commission, you like the fixed sales commission, right? But if you are a motivating person, you have a capacity to increase sales volume, you you love to get the reward, you would like to have variable sales commission. Okay, let's see that what is expected to happen. Our sales is now 575 unit, 575 unit. So we see that our sales price is a sales price remains same, $500 per unit. So 575 multiplied by $500, you will get to 87,500. But our variable expense has gone up from 300 to how much? The new variable expense, which is sales commission per bike, that is $15 per unit. So our variable expense should be $305. And if we multiply this by 575, we get 181,125. And we see that our fixed expense is expected to go down by 6,000. So from 80,000, it is expected to go down by 6,000 to 74,000. We see that it has increased our profit more than 50%. More than 50%. You see that our profit has gone up by 12,375 from the 20,000 in total. We see that our profit is now 32,375. So these are good thing that if we can increase our variable cost per unit and we can reduce our fixed expense, we are getting so many good things. We can increase our sales volume. At the same time, we can also increase our profit margin by more than 60%. Is it more than 60%, the increase of profit? I mean, this 12,375, is it more than 60% of 20,000? Yes. So this is a good thing. You can do the same calculation by using the equation we showed earlier. Okay, next thing. Next example, what we are doing. If RBC has an opportunity to sell 150 bikes to a wholesaler without disturbing sales to other customers or fixed expenses, what price would it quote to the wholesaler if it wants to increase monthly profit by 3,000? So I do not like to change in other things. I do not like to take the sales from other customers from this wholesaler, from other customers to this wholesaler. Again, if we switch to this wholesaler from other customer, our fixed expense will not be disturbed. But we have a purpose. Our purpose that we like to make a monthly profit of 3,000 increase by selling the 150 bikes to the wholesaler. So you see something that what is the question that what price would it quote to the wholesaler if it wants to increase the monthly profit by 3,000? Can you recall that what is the variable expense in our base case? 300. Now, what we like to do, we like to make a profit of 3,000 by selling 150 bikes. Now, per bike, how much profit I have to make? 3,000 divided by 150. Is it to be 20? In that case, our selling price is to be 320. Our selling price is to be 320. Now, why we are not concerning about the fixed expense? Because there has been no changes in the fixed expense. Otherwise, you have to think in more detail. Okay. We see that for the changes of the switching from other customers to the particular wholesaler, and by selling the bike by 320, which includes the variable expense per bike and the $20 per bike profit, we see that our sales will go up by 48,000, or our sales value from this wholesaler will be 48,000. But for this sales, I have to incur this variable cost 45,000, which is 300 multiplied by 150, 45,000. We will see that our net operating profit will go up by 3,000. Now, we have not considered the fixed expense because fixed expense will not be disturbed. Now, break-even analysis, we have seen the break-even in terms of some figures in the previous class. Now, we like to show the break-even by doing some calculation and by looking at some equations or by doing some use of formula. Okay. So here you see that we like to use two ways to get the break-even sales. Can you recall the conceptual, the graphical use of the break-even or graphical application of break-even? But do we know that what is the target profit in break-even sales? What is the target profit in break-even sales? 0. And what is the target loss in case of break-even sales? Same, 0. Okay. Now, what we like to do, we like to find out the equation, or we like to use the equation we learned earlier by forcing the profit equals to 0. We are familiar with this, the base income statement, the contribution format income statement. And we have an additional column here, which expresses the percentage in terms of the selling price is 100%, the variable expense ratio is 60%, the remaining is contribution margin ratio is 40%. And we like to use the use the equation we learned before. Okay, so let me write it down again. Profit. You probably can recall that we have a contribution margin, per unit contribution margin, and we know that how to get it. And if we divide this, if we multiply this by the Q, and we subtract the fixed expenses, we get the profit. Why we are doing this in this way? Because we do not know that what will be our sales. Rather, we like to know that what should be our sales to get the profit equals to 0. That's why I have written the sales in terms of Q, you know that contribution margin equals to price minus variable cost. So price into quantity equals to sales, and the variable expense into quantity is equal to total variable expenses. Okay. So what can we do if we force profit equals to 0? We know that our contribution margin is equal to 500 minus 300 selling price minus variable cost. And if we have this Q here, the quantity we do not know, and we like to know that what should be the break-even quantity. We know that our fixed expense is 80,000. What can we do? We can solve the equation for Q. So if we solve the equation for Q, what we would get? We would get the quantity is 400 units. So what does it mean? It means that if we sell 400 units of bikes, we have no profit, no loss situation, which is known as break-even situation. Okay. Particularly, it is straightforward if your company is a single product company. If your company is a single product company. Can you give me an example of a company of which it has a single product? There is no variation. There is no variation in price, or there is no variation in the quality also. The single product and price is uniform. Try to find out it and respond in the chat box. Respond in the chat box and try to think of it. I'll take your responses later, but let me continue here. The task what we did earlier using the equation, now if we do the same thing using the formula, what can be done? You probably can recall that we tried to find out the contribution margin, and we define the contribution margin in a way that this is the amount available to cover up the fixed expenses. That's why it is possible that use the contribution margin, use the relation between the fixed expense and the contribution margin to find out the break-even sales. This is from the idea about the contribution margin, what we learned earlier. So you see that fixed expense is 80,000. Our contribution margin per unit is 200. So again, same to same, 400 units is our break-even sales unit. So it is same as what we solved in previous slide using the equation. It is the way that how we can use the formula. Now, it is also possible use the same thing, equation and formula to get the dollar sales instead of sales unit. So what can we do? A previous case, we are using the contribution margin only, but here we are using the contribution margin ratio. Here you see we are using the ratio. We are not using the 200 contribution margin per selling per unit as a $200. So why? Because we are using the percentage, because we have now the sales number. I mean, we do not have the actual sales number. We'll do this calculation. We will get the value of sales. It is obviously break-even sales if we put the profit equals to 0. So this is an alternative way of getting break-even, but the dollar break-even sales, and we subtract the fixed expenses as before. So if we force the profit equals to 0, our contribution margin same as 40%. Our sales, we do not know what is our break-even sales. And if we subtract the 80,000 fixed expense, and if we solve this equation for the sales, so you'd get the sales is equal to $200,000. So we know from this number, this is equivalent to the 400 unit break-even sales multiplied by 500 selling price. This is same as same, but yeah, here we are doing the dollar break-even, dollar sales break-even. Similarly, we can use the formula what we used for getting the break-even quantity for the purpose of getting the dollar break-even sales, we need to express the fixed expense in dollar, which is 80,000. We know that our contribution margin in terms of percentage, now you see what is the difference. We are not using the contribution margin dollar. We are using the contribution margin ratio, 0.4. So this should be $200,000. Now the idea is which equation or which formula you will be using depends on what is the requirement to you. Okay. So there is a quick check from you. The similar case what we solved earlier, but the question is different. We like to know the break-even sales dollar. So break-even sales dollar, we like to know what is the break-even sales dollar. We have some information that will be useful. You probably can recall the contribution margin ratio 0.758, if I'm not wrong. So what do we need to do? $1,715. Okay, what is the break-even sales dollar? How can we get it? Which is more convenient here, using the formula or using the equation? If we put here 0, profit equals to 0, and multiply the sales contribution, remember it is contribution margin ratio multiplied by sales. You know that how we have got it. And if we subtract the fixed expense of how much? 1,300 per unit. In that case, you will get a sales of 1,715. Alternatively, you can do this kind of calculation, fixed expense, divide this number by contribution margin. You are expected to get the same thing. I see the responses are coming in huge volume. You find the formula more convenient. 1,715. Okay. So let's check. The computer is asking. Computer is saying that the solution is 1,715. Yeah, good that you have done the thing right in a right way. The next, to check that you have learned it well. What's the break-even sales in unit? The same scenario, but now we like to know the break-even in terms of unit. Here you will use the contribution margin ratio or the contribution margin. We know the contribution margin here is 1.49 minus 0.36. This is our contribution margin. We need to solve the equation in this way. Yeah, by multiply by quantity, and our fixed expense is 1,300. And we like to solve it for profit equals to 0. Alternatively, what can we do? We can use the 1,300 fixed expense. We can divide this number by the contribution margin, which is this amount, 1.49 minus 0.36. If I'm not wrong, it should be the right thing. 1,300 divided by 1.49 by minus 0.36. We see you have responded 1,150. Yeah, that is good. You have understood it well. Now, we'll look at the learning objective 6 in next class. But before finishing our today's lecture, let me ask you about your idea. Many of you live in the Gazipur, and many of you also live in Savar near to EPZ. So they have some makeshift shops for selling tea, or for selling coffee. Do you have an idea that a coffee shop, if I mention coffee shop, it would be misleading. If I mention a tea stall, a makeshift tea stall, do you have idea what is their daily unit sales? Just write your number in the chat box. I have mentioned the area. Don't think of the tea stall is in the TSC or in Nilkhet or New Market, these areas. I have mentioned the area. So I just like to get your idea that what you like to think of. The daily sales unit, daily units of tea they sell to their customer. Write your responses in the chat box. There is no answer in the web. And if you Google for it, you will get no answer. You might get answer if you are so lucky. Yeah, is it? Yeah, in the EPZ area. In the EPZ area, what is the daily unit sales of tea cups of a makeshift tea stall? Around 300 to 400 cups. Okay, good. What about the responses from others? It is not a very challenging question, and there will be no penalty or there will be no award for giving the right or wrong answer. Please try to give your answer. The number of cups is going up as the responses are coming. Good thing. Again, going down. 500 to 600, 800 to 1000, now 100 to 200, 350 almost, 200 to 400, 500 to 700, 600 to 700. Good thing. Okay. 200,000. Shakir, you have written 200,000. Is it the thing you tried to write, or you wrote it by mistake? 500 to 600 cups. I have mentioned the daily. $100 to $150. Okay. Either you do not have the idea that how many people crowd in the EPZ. Yeah, Shakir wrote it intentionally. 200,000. Okay. Okay. Let me write it down for you on the screen. It is approximately 2,000 units per day. I'm not mentioning about a tea stall which has been made on recent days, or I'm not mentioning. I'm just mentioning an established tea stall, makeshift. It is not the thing that from where I have got this number. I have got this number from a YouTube lecture that it is about 2,000 units, and you can verify it if you are closer, or if you live closer to EPZ area. So let me do some calculation for you. let's think of that it is 2000 units and multiply this by 10 taka per cup. In that case, 20,000 taka per unit. Okay, it is a daily volume. Okay, now let's assume that EPZ works for 25 days in a month, and 300 days in a year. Let's assume. In that case, what will be the annual sales of that tea stall? 20,000 multiplied by 300. Are you doing the calculation by yourself? It would be around 600, I mean the 6 million. Yeah, I see. Yeah, 6 million. 6 million taka. Okay, now, if I assume that his fixed expense, fixed expenses around 10,000 taka per month, and the variable expense per cup of tea is 3 taka. Okay. Can you think of what will be his net operating income in a year? You do some calculation by yourself and come up with the answer. I'll ask you several answers from you later. I'll ask you several questions later. Uh, 5.82 million is about, is it the net operating income in a year? Okay, let me ask you the question step by step. What is the annual sales volume if the number of days is 300 and the number of daily sales unit is 2000? Daily annual sales unit, I have erased it. Okay. So quantity is 600,000. And in terms of sales, it is 6 million. And in terms of variable expense, it should be how much? What will be the total variable expense? $1.8 million. Okay. What will be the fixed expense? 120,000. Yeah. 120,000. Now calculate the net operating income. Calculate the net operating income from this information. 6 million sales, subtract the variable expense of 1.8 million, and subtract the fixed expense of 0.12 million. In that case, you will get 4.08 million. Yeah, 4.08 million. Is it how much? 4.08 million. It is a net operating profit of a tea stall. 4.08 million BDT. So if we divide this by monthly, I mean number of months, how much we will get monthly net operating profit? 4.08 divided by 12. 340,000. Remember, it is net operating profit. Can you imagine a salaried person earns monthly salary of 340,000? Can you imagine what should be his position? So this is the way. So nobody among us wants to become a tea seller, but this is the way that how they make profit. And if you have the opportunity to live near to EPZ, you can look for it and you can come up with some numbers that what is their daily sales of tea. Is it closer to 2,000 or more than this or less than this or half of this? Just think of if it is still half of this, the amount is huge. The amount is huge, and that happens. And there is no way that to underestimate a person that because he only sells tea in a street. So that's all about for our today's class. Hope you have enjoyed it, and we'll be meeting in the next class. Thank you all for joining. If you have no question, let me stop the record.